Welcome back. Today, the 1926 census has been released to the public, giving us an insight into the lives of people living in Ireland 100 years ago.
And here to tell us more about why this is so important is genealogist Daniel Loftus. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning. The first time in 100 years we'll see what with the snapshot of Ireland 100 years ago. But tell us why a census is actually so important.
So a census is so important because it gives us such an insight into Ireland at the time in each family. You know, we get an idea of their age, their occupation. You know, it's a snapshot of life after a time of conflict and a time of unrest. So to see something capture that in one day, you know, it's one day of many years, and it just gives us an idea as to what society was like at the time with occupations and everything else.
Yeah.
Okay, this one's been locked away for 100 years.
Yes.
Whereas some of the other, and it's, what is it, 60 years since the last one was?
Yes, about 64, 65 years since the last one.
Why did they decide to lock this one away for this amount of time?
So it's due to the Statistics Act, which stipulates that it has to be kind of concealed away for 100 years. And due to that legislation, we don't ever see a census until 100 years later. So the next one we will see after this is April 2036. So we've got another time to wait until the next one. So we'll be making a lot of use of this one until we get the next one.
We won't be around for the next.
Well, let's wait and see. Our AI versions will be here.
Oh God!
Don't AI Daniel.
I don't think AI characters can be actually counted in the census at the moment. But listen, can you give us a history of the census in Ireland? Because of this one, of course, is very significant.
Yes. So 1821 through to 1911, it was taken every 10 years, and we've had a very bad history with the census in that when the Civil War was happening and the Public Records Office fire occurred, we'd lost a lot of the earlier censuses. So from 1821 through to 51, we'd lost a lot of the census returns, as a lot of them were burnt in the fire. And then 1861 and 71 were destroyed shortly after being taken, to the effect of we didn't want people looking at them afterwards. So, like, you know, we didn't want people frolicking through the census and having a look at them. Then 1881 and 1891 were pulped during the First World War, so we lost those as well.
Yeah.
And then the 1901 and 11 censuses were the only kind of complete ones, which were made available under a ministerial order in 1961, and then were made digitalised between 2007 and 2009 by the National Archives.
It's fascinating, actually, when you see. I did look into the digitised versions of those years, and you see the actual snapshot, as you said, of what is happening in any individual's families. It's amazing. And I suppose the ones that were lost was just after the famine as well. I suppose the decades after the famine, you see quite a significant drop in population, which obviously is convenient for them to be destroyed as well. But a massive undertaking, really, by the National Archives to do this.
Yes, I mean, all due respect for every single one of them who worked on this for years. It's such an interesting undertaking, and I mean, they would have had to try not to share any of this. And I can only imagine their excitement just even looking at this and just knowing that they get to look at it beforehand, and then they get the excitement of releasing all of that to the public.
Yeah. Okay. 1926 was a different Ireland from the census that was taken in 1911. So what were the major findings from this census? So
1926 is interesting in that we get a glimpse in the first ever census to actually record a number of the major mother and baby homes that we know today. So Besborough and Tuam, they're both recorded in it, and it's the first time that you actually see women and children who were named in the homes. And I looked at this last night and I got emotional over it because it was so, I mean, due to a time of secrecy, you know, seeing actually something that actually identifies these children and the mothers and people who worked in it, and just to see, you know, them recorded and not going to be lost to time was just something so captivating, something so impressive. And it's just something to behold, just having a look at them. And it just gives a glimpse into Ireland at the time, and with that came institutionalisation and an awful lot of social change from the conflicts.
Because when you think of this time as well, it was after the foundation of the Free State, the first, I suppose, that the breakaway from the British Empire as it was, and so seeing those statistics is hugely, hugely important as to the way Ireland was going. Were there any other findings that were of note during that census?
Well, I suppose I could be a bit biased and say my own grandparents. I got to see them for the first time in the census.
Which is hugely, it's important to see
Yes,
these things.
indeed.
Yeah.
But I had an early night. I decided against an all-nighter. So I will be looking at plenty of them later on. But yes, it's such a packed census full of information in many different respects.
Okay. We're also a mixed nation because, you know, and this census reveals that there were people from all over Europe, from different parts of the world, who had made Ireland their home in 1926. And some of those figures, and that was not just around the city areas, but in rural areas too. Can you explain that to us a little bit more?
So between the 1911-1926 census, we do see a population decrease, and that would have been obviously people emigrating, and you know it was a big boom in that time, because I know obviously a lot of my family have moved from like rural Mayo out to New York or somewhere else. So it shows kind of a shift in the population, but also it shows us information regarding you know, even just knowing how much land somebody owned. Like like my grandparents, I think, owned 8 acres and 7 acres. So just seeing like little tidbits of information like that, or seeing that they were self-employed, or if they worked for somebody else, just seeing something like that just brings it all to life. I think even more than the 1901 and 11 censuses did, because when you see labourer, you don't necessarily have a great idea as to what that might have entailed, but when you see information regarding, you know, who they're employed by, and you know what kind of area they worked in, you know, it adds that bit of sort of a kind of a third dimension, if you will.
How many categories are in this? I mean,
there are 2 forms.
Yeah.
So there's one, Form A, which is the household return. So institution, hospital, whatever it may be, they're all classed as household returns. And then Form B is the enumeration of buildings return. So you get information about the actual homes themselves, like how many rooms they had, how many windows, how many you know, Catholic denomination were living there, how many Protestant denomination were living there. It gives you an awful lot of contextual information into the area.
There was a fall in the amount of Protestants simply because it was a 26 county rather than 32 county census. So for those who will spend the weekend logging in to find about granny and great granny and great granddad, tips on what they should do and what they would need. Is it just names?
Yes. So currently you can only search by district electoral division, a town and a street, and a name. So if you know the name of someone at the time, I tend to look for the youngest person and the most static name. So, for example, if I'm looking for, like my granddad was Michael, so I'd look for Michael Loftus because I know his name is fairly static. It doesn't change too much. So I'd look for him, and he was 5 at the time of the census. So I'd look for him. And then I try and get an idea as to where they might have been living at the time. So they lived out in Treen, Duff and Bahola. So I looked for Michael Loftus, and then looked for Tucanana, which is the area of where they were living. And I was able to find them fairly easily. So you can filter after the fact, after you do the initial search by age, and if you know an occupation that they would have had at the time, especially for ones who were quite distinct, you'd be able to find them then. And then you can actually see the original household return in colour.
telling you, I'll be going down a rabbit hole this weekend.
There's a lot of people who suddenly realised how they're going to spend the next few days. Daniel, great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Now, still to come, almost 1 in 4 people in Ireland have set screen limits on their devices to avoid spending too much time on their phones. We'll be getting a lesson in digital detoxing shortly.
Plus, we'll have an Oscar winner in our midst, film fanatic Neil Jordan will be with us to chat about his first foray into sci-fi. See you shortly.